Hi, I am John the Mouse. In this video, we're going to talk about how to figure out your transportation business operation cost per mile. This and some stuff I'll go in detail at John the Mouse University. With better information, you can make better decisions, not only on your transportation business, but on your personal transportation. So let's roll into it. Every business needs to make money. Otherwise, they will go out of business. I know this seems pretty obvious, but how do you tell how your business is doing? It doesn't matter what type of business transportation you have. Your operation has a lot of moving parts that you can lose track of during the day-to-day operations. As you'll go through the course, I will break down a lot of these different areas with more detail. As a business owner, you will need to try to have all these areas work as smoothly as possible. Just like your home finances, you always have to be looking at your bottom line. But the question is, how do you measure that? There is a lot of different ways you can measure that, or come up with your own, but I'm going to show you one metric here based on miles you travel. Once you start getting an idea of what your different metrics look like, you can start making more informed decisions on what areas you can improve in to make your company more competitive than your competition. In return, your company is going to be more profitable. Now, for our purpose of comparing our information, I'm going to figure this chart out for the year. If you run a taxi service, maybe you want to do it by the day. But you have plenty of options by the week, by the trip, or by the month. It just depends on how you want to do it. I am going to show you something with this chart that I learned years ago by crunching the numbers with my own business. This is something I implemented during the 2008 recession when I was running my own truck. I know some will disagree and say no to cheap freight. I wasn't afraid to haul it. One reason is I had a lower operating expense that I will show you throughout my course. This chart I have made has two columns, one for 100,000 miles and one for 150,000 miles. Down the side, I have listed two types of expenses you're going to have with your transportation business. The first group is going to be with your fixed expenses that will stay the same price over the year, like your truck payment, vehicle insurance premiums, any annual licenses and registrations, your phone plan, office, space, shop. Let's not forget most important one, John the Mouse University educational program. Your next group is more variable, like fuel costs, depending on the quality of fuel mileage, and the amount of miles you run. All factors in how much fuel you're going to use. As you go through the course, we'll talk about some fuel saving methods to bring your costs down. But for this chart, we're going to say you're going to have the same cost of fuel, run with the same fuel mileage. With this example, you could almost say this is a dedicated run. Let's compare the two sides. The fixed expenses stay in the same. Doesn't matter how many miles you run. Some could say this is working harder, or you're being more productive with your time over the year to get in more miles. This is another area we can talk about in a later session of this course. As we compare these two columns, the extra 50,000 miles for over-road truck would represent roughly 72 days at 700 miles. For a month, that would be 6 full work days, or less than a day and a half a week. During the 2008 recession, I knew quite a few drivers that would sit a day to a day and a half to try and get a higher paying load. Now, did this work out for them? I'm not sure of the dollar amount. What I do know is, at the end of the month, I had one more round trip in than they did. The maintenance fund is going to be set at the same rate per mile. This rate should be set high enough that it will cover your maintenance. Every component in the vehicle wears down and will need to be replaced at some time. I believe this is where a lot of people make the mistake and start spending that money towards luxuries in their home life. This is a business, not your personal piggy bank. I'm going to cover personal finance later in this course. According to Warner, regional drivers pay 37 cents to 55 cents per mile. Over-the-road drivers are between 44 cents to 58 cents per mile. Dedicated drivers are between 40 cents to 64 cents per mile. So on our chart, we're going to put 50 cents per mile for the average. Running a team is another way to bring down some more cost per equipment. We'll talk about my experience with team driving over the years in another section. Now, if you're running like a taxi service, this means you would have two different drivers, one for day shift and one for evening shift. Now that we have calculated all the numbers and come to the bottom line of our minimum operating expense of the two categories, if you need more time, feel free to pause the video to crunch the numbers yourself. I think this is important that you understand the small part in the bigger picture of your transportation business. You can see that the $150K expense are lower than the $100K expense. Doesn't seem like much of a difference, but let's look closer into it. We're going to run both companies to the average of $100K minimum operating expense to represent the days waiting for the better paying load. For my experience over the years, the more time drivers sit around, the more money they spend. Now, after adding up the company and driver expenses, we can see one possible income. Which one looks like they are close to maybe going under if they keep running the way they are running? Remember, cheap freight for one company might be low-cost freight for another. Once you understand what your costs are in the transportation business, you can apply what you've learned through these courses to start taking steps to control your costs to bring down your operating expense. This will be an ongoing process as things change over time that will have a direct impact on your bottom line.